I'll take legal action against you, Victor spat, his face inches from mine. The conference room went silent as 27 colleagues stared, frozen mid-motion. Some clutched their pens tighter, others averted their eyes, but all held their breath. The quarterly staff meeting had derailed spectacularly when I'd refused to approve the Riverside Plaza designs. You think anyone cares about a few inches of doorway width? About some stupid bumpy strips on the ground? He stabbed his finger into my project folder. You're costing us millions with these ridiculous demands. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. Those stupid bumpy strips are the difference between a blind person finding their way safely or getting lost. Those few inches determine if someone can use a bathroom or not. Victor's eyes narrowed to slits. His tie, bright red, like a warning sign, hung crookedly from his neck. Brynn, you're done. I'm calling my attorney right now. We'll sue you personally for breach of contract and professional sabotage. The room seemed to shrink. 2 interns exchanged wide-eyed glances. My direct supervisor studied her coffee cup as if it contained ancient wisdom. Nobody moved to defend me. Please do, I replied, gathering my things with hands that refused to tremble. Call your attorney. I'd love to explain exactly how many accessibility violations you've pressured me to overlook. His lips curled into an ugly sneer. You've signed off on every project. Your signature, your professional liability. Remember that. What he didn't know was that I remembered everything. Every conversation, every threat, every modification I'd been forced to make against my better judgment. What he couldn't see was the small recording device in my blazer pocket, the one that had captured our private meetings for months. Meeting adjourned, Victor announced, already pulling out his phone. I walked out with my head high, feeling 27 pairs of eyes boring into my back. Through the glass wall, I watched him pace, gesturing wildly into his phone. His face twisted with rage, then shifted to confusion, then drained of color entirely. 23 minutes later, as I sat in my car wondering if I'd just destroyed my career, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You might want to see this. Attached was a recording that would change everything. I never expected this story to resonate with so many of you. If you're finding yourself drawn into what happened next, take a second to hit like and subscribe. I post new content every week about standing up against workplace injustice. Drop a comment about whether you've ever had to make a difficult ethical stand at work. Your experiences help others feel less alone. My name is Brynn Harlow, and until 3 months ago, I was the Senior Accessibility Compliance Specialist at one of the largest urban development firms in the Northeast. For nearly 4 years, I reviewed building plans to ensure they met the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements: ramp gradients, doorway widths, tactile pathways, bathroom dimensions. Not glamorous work, but work that mattered. I grew up with my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 9. When she had a stroke at 72, I watched her world shrink overnight. Suddenly, 3 steps might as well have been a mountain. A door 2 inches too narrow meant she couldn't enter. The woman who once traveled the world was now trapped by poor design. That's why I became an accessibility specialist. Because architecture isn't just about aesthetics. It's about who gets included and who gets shut out. At first, the job felt meaningful. I caught violations before construction began. I educated architects about universal design principles. I believed I was making the world a little more navigable for people like my grandmother. Then Victor became the new director. Our first clash happened 6 weeks after his arrival. The Pinewood Medical Center plans came across my desk with significant violations: insufficient turning radiuses in patient bathrooms, emergency call buttons mounted too high, examination tables not designed for transfer from wheelchairs. These need major revisions, I told him, highlighting the issues. Victor leaned against my desk, arms crossed. The client's already approved the budget. Make it work. It doesn't meet code. I can't sign off. Look, Brynn, he said, lowering his voice. This is a $30 million project. The client will walk if we increase costs now. Just be flexible on the interpretations. There's no interpretation of a 60-inch turning radius. It either is or isn't. His friendly demeanor vanished. You're new to the big leagues. Sometimes compliance is negotiable. That night, I couldn't sleep. Was this normal? Was I being rigid? I called my mentor from graduate school, who confirmed my suspicions. Victor was asking me to break the law. The next morning, I revised the plans myself, detailing exactly what needed changing to meet requirements. I sent them directly to the project architect, copying Victor. 2 hours later, He stormed to my cubicle. Who authorized you to contact the architect directly? I'm doing my job. These aren't suggestions. They're legal requirements. His voice dropped to a whisper. Listen carefully. There are 20 people in line for your position who understand how things really work. Don't make me replace you. I swallowed hard but held my ground. I won't approve non-compliant designs. For weeks, we engaged in a silent war. I would reject plans. Mysterious, revised versions with my forged signature would appear. I would flag violations. Victor would dismiss them as minor issues. The Pinewood project moved forward with half my recommendations ignored. Then came the day I received an email that made my blood run cold. It was from a mother whose son used a wheelchair. They'd visited the newly opened Pinewood Medical Center, and he'd been unable to use the bathroom independently. The turning radius was too small, exactly as I'd warned. I thought places like this were supposed to be accessible, she wrote. My son was humiliated. I printed her email and walked straight into Victor's office, closing the door behind me. This is why compliance matters, I said, placing the letter on his desk. He barely glanced at it. One complaint from one person. Cost of doing business. That one person is exactly who these laws are designed to protect. Victor leaned back in his chair. You know what your problem is, Brynn? You think these regulations are sacred texts. They're guidelines, open to interpretation. They're civil rights laws, I countered. Would you call racial discrimination laws guidelines? His face hardened. Don't be dramatic. We're talking about a few inches here and there. A few inches that determine if someone can use a bathroom or not. He stood up suddenly. I'm done having this conversation. The Riverside Plaza plans need your sign-off by tomorrow. Make it happen. Those plans had even worse violations than Pinewood, and I knew then that this pattern would continue project after project unless something changed. That night, I made a decision that would eventually lead to that confrontation in the conference room, to Victor's threats of legal action, and to the text message that now sat on my phone, waiting to be opened. I clicked on the attachment, holding my breath. The recording began with Victor's voice, tight with controlled rage. She's completely out of line, Patrick. I need you to shut her down. Breach of contract, professional sabotage, anything. Make an example of her. A pause, then a deeper voice responded. Which compliance regulations is she insisting on? All of them. Doorway widths, ramp gradients, bathroom dimensions. She's treating the ADA like it's scripture. Another pause. And you want her to not enforce these requirements? I want her to be reasonable. These aren't hospital rooms. They're retail spaces and office buildings. Nobody's life depends on an extra 2 inches of doorway. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. When the other man, presumably Patrick, Victor's attorney, spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Victor, my daughter Lily uses a wheelchair. She's 12. Do you know how many places she can't go because of just 2 inches? How many times we've had to leave restaurants because she couldn't use the bathroom? How many school events she's missed because there wasn't a ramp? Victor's stammering response was painful to hear. I didn't realize. No, you didn't. Patrick cut in, his voice ice cold. And let me be crystal clear. I will not be representing you in this matter. In fact, I'll be personally notifying the state licensing board about these violations. Patrick, wait. I've advised many difficult clients, Victor, but I draw the line at someone who knowingly violates accessibility laws. Laws that exist so people like my daughter can participate in society with basic dignity. You can't. I absolutely can. And I will. Good luck finding another attorney willing to defend intentional ADA violations. They're not just compliance issues. They're civil rights violations. The recording ended. I sat frozen in my car, heart pounding. Through my windshield, I could see the office building where, up on the 14th floor, Victor was probably having the worst day of his professional life. My phone buzzed again with another text from the unknown number. He's in full panic mode. Board members have been called in. Thought you should know. I stared at my phone, trying to process what was happening. The mysterious ally had to be someone inside the office, someone who'd witnessed the confrontation and decided to help me. But who? I drove home in a daze, adrenaline still coursing through my body. My apartment felt like a stranger's place. I walked from room to room, unable to settle. Had I just ended my career? Or had I finally done what I should have done months ago? At 7:38 p.m., my phone rang. The screen displayed Meera Chaudhry, the firm's HR director. Brynn, can you come in tomorrow morning at 9? The executive board wants to meet with you. My stomach dropped. Am I fired? A pause. Just be there at 9. And Brynn, Bring any documentation you have regarding the accessibility issues you've raised. I spent the night gathering evidence, emails, project notes, revised plans showing the before and after of Victor's adjustments. Around 3 a.m., I found myself staring at my grandmother's photograph on my nightstand. Was this worth it, Gran? I whispered to her smiling face. She'd always told me to stand my ground when it mattered, but she'd never mentioned how terrifying it would feel. Morning came too quickly. I dressed carefully. Charcoal gray pantsuit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back, professional, unshakable. The opposite of how I felt. The executive boardroom was silent when I entered. 7 people sat around the table, including Mira from HR and Elliot Greaves, the company's founder. Victor sat at the far end, his face ashen. Miss Harlow, Elliot began, we understand you have concerns about our compliance practices. For the next hour, I presented my evidence. The Pinewood Medical Center bathroom that didn't meet turning radius requirements. The Riverside Plaza with insufficient, accessible parking. The Oak Ridge Mall with inadequate tactile pathways for the visually impaired. Project after project where accessibility had been compromised for aesthetics or cost savings. I showed them the email from the mother whose son couldn't use the Pinewood bathroom. I shared letters from advocacy groups questioning our firm's commitment to accessibility. This isn't just about following rules, I concluded. It's about whether we're creating spaces that welcome everyone or exclude the most vulnerable. The board members exchanged glances. Victor stared at the table, jaw clenched. Elliot cleared his throat. Victor, would you care to respond? Victor's head snapped up. These are complex projects with hundreds of requirements. Minor oversights happen. Brynn is blowing this out of proportion. Minor oversights? I echoed. Is that what you call it when you told me? And I quote, nobody's going to notice if the Braille signage isn't perfect? I never said that. I pulled out my phone. Would you like me to play the recording? The room went completely still. Victor's face drained of color. You recorded our conversations? He whispered. After you started altering my signed documents? Yes, I did. Mira leaned forward. You altered signed compliance documents? Victor's eyes darted around the room, seeking an ally and finding none. We had deadlines to meet, budgets to maintain. She was being obstinate. She was doing her job, Elliot said quietly. The job we hired her to do. What followed was the most uncomfortable 30 minutes of my professional life. The board asked pointed questions about specific projects, violations, and Victor's instructions to me. With each answer, Victor seemed to shrink smaller in his chair. Finally, Elliot turned to me. Miss Harlow, we owe you an apology. This company was founded on principles of integrity and excellence. Somewhere along the way, it seems we lost sight of that. I nodded, unsure what to say. We'd like you to stay on, he continued. In fact, we'd like to create a new position, Director of Accessibility and Compliance, reporting directly to me. Would that interest you? The offer stunned me. Yes, it would. Excellent. Mira will work out the details with you. He turned to Victor. As for you, we'll continue this conversation privately. As the meeting dispersed, Victor caught up to me in the hallway, his expression a mix of fury and panic. You planned this, he hissed. You set me up. I met his gaze steadily. No, Victor. You set yourself up the moment you decided some people's access to the world was negotiable. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. This isn't over. You think you've won? I built relationships with every major client this firm has. They'll follow me. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe they'll prefer working with a firm that doesn't expose them to lawsuits and bad publicity. His eyes narrowed. You have no idea who you're dealing with. As he stormed away, I realized he was right. I didn't know what Victor was capable of when cornered. And despite the apparent victory, a cold weight settled in my stomach. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Little did I know, Victor's threat in the hallway wasn't empty words. Within days, I would discover exactly how far he would go to destroy me, and how much I would need to sacrifice to stop him. The first warning came from an unexpected source. Zoe, a junior designer who'd always been friendly but not particularly close to me, slipped a note onto my new desk 2 days later. He's meeting with Tanner Holdings tonight. Be careful. Tanner Holdings was our biggest client, responsible for nearly 40% of the firm's annual revenue. If Victor convinced them to follow him to a new firm, my victory would be short-lived, and dozens of my colleagues would lose their jobs. I stared at the note, heart racing. The war I thought I'd won had only just begun. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by project files. My promotion came with access to records I'd never seen before, including the complete client histories and financial arrangements Victor had negotiated. What I found made my stomach turn. The Tanner Holdings contracts contained special accommodation clauses that essentially allowed them to bypass standard compliance reviews for aesthetic considerations. It was corporate, speak for ignoring, accessibility laws whenever they interfered with their design vision. I was still processing this discovery when my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was Drew, one of the project architects who had always been quietly supportive. "Can I come in?" he asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Once inside, he didn't waste time. "Victor called an emergency meeting with Tanner Holdings tonight. He's telling them you're on a crusade that will add millions to their development costs." "How do you know this?" Drew hesitated. "I was invited, as were half the senior architects. He's building a coalition, Brynn. He's promising to start a new firm that will be more pragmatic about regulations." "You mean illegal?" I corrected. "Call it what you want, but 5 architects are ready to follow him. If Tanner goes too, the firm could collapse." I sank into a chair. "Why are you telling me this?" Drew's expression softened. "My brother has multiple sclerosis. 5 years ago, he could walk. Now he uses a wheelchair. I've watched his world shrink building by building." He leaned forward. "Victor doesn't just want to leave. He wants to destroy you first. He's telling everyone you fabricated evidence against him." After Drew left, I called Elliot at home, something I'd never done before. He listened silently as I explained what was happening. "Come to my house," he finally said. "Now." An hour later, I sat in Elliot's study with him and 2 board members. The gravity on their faces told me everything. "Tanner Holdings represents nearly 40% of our annual revenue," one board member said. "If they leave, we'll have to lay off half the staff by Christmas." "So what are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. Elliot rubbed his temples. "Maybe we were hasty. Perhaps a compromise." "A compromise on accessibility laws?" I interrupted. "There is no compromise on civil rights. Brynn, be reasonable. We're talking about people's livelihoods. And I'm talking about people's lives. Every compromise means someone can't enter a building, use a bathroom, navigate a public space." The room fell silent. I could feel my new position slipping away before I'd even settled into it. "What if," I said carefully, "there was another way to handle Tanner?" 3 sets of eyes locked onto mine. "I need 24 hours, I continued, "and complete access to all Tanner project files." Elliot studied me. "What are you planning?" "Better if you don't know yet, but I promise I won't do anything to harm the firm." He hesitated, then nodded. 24 hours. I worked through the night, combing through years of Tanner Holdings projects. By morning, I'd identified 17 buildings with significant accessibility violations, all approved under Victor's supervision, all potentially exposing Tanner to millions in litigation. At 7 a.m., I walked into the office of Andrea Luna, the city's most prominent disability rights attorney. By 10 a.m., I had what I needed. That afternoon, I pulled into the parking lot of Tanner Holdings headquarters. The sleek glass building loomed above me. Ironic, given its own accessibility issues that I'd flagged 2 years earlier and Victor had dismissed. In the lobby, I asked for Preston Tanner. His assistant looked at me skeptically. "Mr. Tanner is extremely busy today. Do you have an appointment? Tell him Brynn Harlow is here regarding potential ADA litigation." 10 minutes later, I sat across from Preston Tanner himself, a man whose signature had authorized millions in construction with blatant accessibility violations. "Miss Harlow," he began smoothly, "Victor has already explained your zealous approach to compliance." I placed a folder on his desk. This contains documentation of 17 Tanner properties with significant accessibility violations. The second folder contains Andrea Luna's assessment of potential damages should a class action lawsuit be filed. His face tightened. "Is this a threat?" "No, it's an opportunity." I slid a third folder across his desk. This contains revised plans for all 17 buildings, retrofitting costs, timeline for compliance, and most importantly, a pledge from our firm to cover 30% of those costs. Preston blinked. "Why would your firm absorb those costs?" "Because we should have never approved the original plans. We failed in our professional duty." I leaned forward. "Mr. Tanner, Victor is offering to help you continue ignoring these laws. I'm offering to help you comply with them at reduced cost and with no publicity. And if I prefer Victor's approach?" I held his gaze. "Andrea Luna has the same documentation I just showed you. She's prepared to file tomorrow." His expression darkened. "That's definitely a threat." "No, A threat would be telling you that we've identified potential tax irregularities in how these accessibility shortcuts were accounted for. This was a calculated bluff, but his sudden pallor told me it had hit a nerve. The meeting lasted another hour. By the end, Preston Tanner had agreed to remain with our firm and implement the retrofitting plan. More importantly, he'd agreed to make a public commitment to accessibility in all future projects. I drove back to our office feeling hollow rather than triumphant. I'd won, but through tactics that left a bitter taste. Elliot was waiting when I returned. Tanner just called me. What did you do? I explained the agreement, watching his expression shift from shock to grudging admiration. That was audacious, he said finally. It was necessary. Victor won't take this lying down. He was right. Victor's retaliation came swiftly and brutally. The next morning, an email circulated to the entire firm and major clients, claiming I had engaged in extortion and unethical practices. Attached were edited snippets of conversations that made it sound like I had threatened clients for personal gain. What followed were the most grueling weeks of my professional life. Each day brought new allegations. Victor had been methodical, building his case against me for months, saving out of context statements and manipulating documentation. 3 clients requested I be removed from their projects. 2 board members suggested placing me on leave while the allegations were investigated. Even Drew began avoiding my eyes in the hallway. The worst moment came when Elliot called me into his office, his expression grave. The board is concerned, Brynn. These allegations are false, I insisted. Victor manipulated those recordings, perhaps, but perception matters in this business. Clients are nervous. My throat tightened. So you're firing me? No, he sighed. But we need to move you to internal projects only. No client contact until this resolves. It was a demotion in all but name. As I walked back to my office, I passed the conference room where it had all started, where Victor had threatened legal action and unwittingly set his own downfall in motion. Only his downfall hadn't happened. Somehow, despite everything, he was winning. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by evidence that now seemed useless. Victor had poisoned the well so thoroughly that the truth hardly mattered anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the same one that had sent me the recording of Victor and his lawyer. Don't give up. Check your email in 10 minutes. At precisely 9 p.m., an email arrived from an anonymous address. The subject line read simply, "The truth about Victor." The attachment was a video file. With shaking hands, I clicked play. The screen showed Victor in a hotel bar, speaking to someone off camera. He was clearly intoxicated, tie loosened, gesturing expansively. "She thinks she's so righteous with her accessibility crusade," he slurred. "You know what I tell clients? Just build it however you want. If someone complains, it's cheaper to settle one lawsuit than redesign the whole building." The off-camera voice asked something I couldn't hear. Victor laughed. "Ethics? In this business? Look, 90% of people don't need ramps or special bathrooms. Why spend millions accommodating the other 10%? He continued, growing more animated, outlining his systematic approach to circumventing accessibility laws, admitting to falsifying compliance documents, and boasting about the kickbacks he received for saving clients' money. It was a complete confession, damning in every way. As the video ended, a final text came through. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., board meeting. This goes to every board member, client, and regulatory agency unless you stop it." I stared at my phone, heart pounding. The mysterious ally was offering me complete victory. Victor would be ruined professionally, possibly even criminally charged. All I had to do was show up and watch it happen. If you're feeling as conflicted as I was in this moment, you're not alone. What would you do with this kind of power over someone who tried to destroy you? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and hit subscribe if you want to see how this ethical dilemma resolves. Sometimes the most difficult choices reveal who we truly are. The boardroom was eerily silent as I entered the next morning. Every member was present, along with Mira from HR and the company's general counsel. Victor sat at the far end, looking smug. "Thank you all for coming," Elliot began. "We're here to address the allegations against Brynn Harlow and determine appropriate action." Victor straightened his perfectly pressed shirt. "I believe the evidence I've provided speaks for itself." "Does it?" I asked quietly, "because I have evidence of my own." I connected my laptop to the projection system. Victor's smile didn't waver. He thought he knew what I had. He was wrong. I didn't play the video from the hotel bar. Instead, I displayed a series of unaltered project documents showing the original accessibility violations, alongside Victor's emails instructing me to approve them. These are the actual violations I refuse to approve, I explained, not for personal gain, but because they broke the law. One by one, I methodically dismantled Victor's allegations, using only official company records and unedited communications. No secret recordings, no anonymous videos, just the plain, documented truth. Victor's composure began to crack. These are taken out of context. I was simply trying to meet client needs while what? I interrupted. While violating federal law? While excluding people with disabilities from public spaces? The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. I continued methodically presenting evidence, project by project, violation by violation. Miss Harlow, the general counsel interjected, this is certainly concerning, but Mr. Reeves has provided recordings that suggest you've been less than ethical yourself. Those recordings were selectively edited, I replied. I have the originals. I played the complete conversations, where it became clear that Victor had cut and spliced my statements to completely change their meaning. Where he'd made it sound like I was threatening clients, the full recordings showed me explaining legal liabilities they might face for non-compliance. Victor's face flushed deep red. This proves nothing. She's manipulated these files. Digital timestamps and metadata would prove otherwise, I said calmly. Your IT department can verify them. As Victor's defense crumbled, I noticed something strange. He kept glancing nervously at his phone, which was buzzing with incoming messages. Elliot cleared his throat. Victor, would you care to respond to these allegations? Victor loosened his collar. This is a witch hunt. Brynn has had it out for me since day one because I challenged her rigid interpretations. Rigid interpretations of what? Civil rights laws? I asked. You're being dramatic. Am I? I turned to address the room. Yesterday, I visited Pinewood Medical Center, one of our recent projects. I asked to use the accessible bathroom that Victor insisted was close enough to compliance. I pulled out my phone and displayed photos. The turning radius is 4 inches too small. Do you know what that means in practical terms? It means someone in a wheelchair can enter the bathroom but can't turn around to leave. They become trapped. The room fell silent. This isn't about bureaucratic red tape, I continued. It's about human dignity. It's about whether we believe everyone deserves equal access to the spaces we create. Victor's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and the color drained from his face. If you'll excuse me, he muttered, standing abruptly. We're not finished here, Elliot said sharply. I need to take this call. Sit down, Victor. The authority in Elliot's voice made Victor sink back into his chair. His phone continued to vibrate in his hand. Something wrong? I asked innocently. Victor glared at me with naked hatred. What did you do? I presented the truth, that's all. His phone buzzed again. Unable to resist, he glanced at the screen, then looked up at me with dawning horror. You said you wouldn't release it. I blinked, genuinely confused. Release what? Before he could respond, the boardroom door opened. Patrick Wallace, Victor's high-powered attorney, walked in, followed by a young woman in a wheelchair. The room fell silent. The woman couldn't have been more than 16, with intelligent eyes and an unmistakable resemblance to Patrick. Sorry to interrupt, Patrick said, his voice cold. I'm Patrick Wallace. This is my daughter, Lily. Victor looked like he might be sick. Mr. Greaves, Patrick continued, addressing Elliot. I believe you've received my email regarding Mr. Reeves' conduct. Elliot nodded slowly. Just now, yes. Then you understand why we're here. Victor stood up, panic evident on his face. Patrick, whatever you think I've done, save it. Patrick cut him off. My daughter wanted to see the man who believes people like her don't deserve equal access to public spaces. Lily wheeled forward, stopping directly across from Victor. You said it's not worth spending millions to accommodate 10% of people. Her voice was steady, her gaze unflinching. I'm part of that 10%. The blood drained from Victor's face. That conversation was private. How did you... My dad's assistant recorded you at the bar last night, she explained. She recognized you from her brother's workplace. Her brother uses a wheelchair too. I suddenly understood. The mysterious ally, the person who'd sent me the recording of Victor and Patrick's phone call, the video from the bar, it had been Patrick's assistant all along. Victor, Elliot said, his voice unnaturally calm. Would you care to explain what Miss Wallace is referring to? Victor's eyes darted around the room, seeking escape. I may have had too much to drink, said things I didn't mean, like admitting you falsified compliance documents. Patrick asked. Or bragging about receiving kickbacks for helping clients circumvent accessibility laws. The general counsel leaned forward. Kickbacks? Victor's defense collapsed entirely. This is absurd. You can't possibly. I've already filed complaints with the State Licensing Board and the Department of Justice, Patrick interrupted. The video evidence is quite compelling. What followed was the professional equivalent of a public execution. As Victor stammered through increasingly desperate denials, Patrick methodically outlined the legal consequences of his actions, both for Victor personally and potentially for the firm. However, Patrick concluded, Ms. Harlow's detailed documentation shows she consistently pushed for compliance despite pressure. That will significantly mitigate the firm's liability. All eyes turned to me. I had remained silent during Patrick's presentation, watching Victor's world collapse around him. Did you plan this? Victor hissed at me. I met his gaze. No, I didn't know about the video until last night. And, unlike you, I chose not to use it. His eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. But you could have. Yes. Why didn't you? The question hung in the air. The truth was, I had wrestled with that decision all night. The video would have destroyed him instantly, but something about using it felt wrong, too much like becoming what I despised about him. Because this was never about destroying you, Victor. It was about protecting people from your decisions. The meeting concluded with Victor being placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. As people filed out of the boardroom, Lily wheeled over to me. Thank you, she said simply. For what? I didn't know about the video. She smiled. Not for that. For caring enough to fight. Most people don't. As she turned to leave, I realized something. How did you know I didn't use the video? That I chose not to release it? Kamala told me, my dad's assistant. She said you texted back last night that you wouldn't need it, that you'd find another way. You know what's strange? I said. For weeks, I fantasized about taking Victor down, but when I had the chance to destroy him completely, it didn't feel right. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, Lily replied. It's change. Those words stayed with me long after the meeting ended. 3 weeks later, the firm announced significant changes. Victor had resigned to pursue other opportunities, a corporate euphemism that fooled no one. The Department of Justice had opened an investigation into his conduct. 5 projects were undergoing emergency retrofitting to address accessibility violations. My new role as Director of Accessibility and Compliance was made permanent, with expanded authority and resources. More importantly, the firm established a community advisory board that included people with various disabilities to review major projects. The most meaningful change came 6 months later, when we unveiled the renovated Pinewood Medical Center. Every bathroom now exceeded accessibility requirements. Every pathway included proper tactile strips. Every entrance featured automatic doors with the correct dimensions. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I watched an elderly man in a wheelchair navigate the space with ease, his face showing none of the frustration and humiliation that so many experience in poorly designed buildings. Elliot stood beside me. You know, when this all started, I thought you were being rigid, uncompromising. And now? He gestured toward the elderly man, who was now demonstrating to his grandchildren how easily he could maneuver in the spacious bathroom. Now I understand what was really at stake. That evening, I visited my grandmother's grave, bringing fresh flowers and news of my work. As I sat beside her headstone, I thought about Victor, who had underestimated me, underestimated the law, and most fatally, underestimated the power of designing spaces for everyone. My revenge wasn't in his professional destruction, though that had certainly happened. My revenge wasn't even in taking his position or undoing his harmful work. My true revenge was in creating spaces where people like my grandmother, like Lily, like the elderly man at Pinewood, could move through the world with dignity, where a mother wouldn't have to explain to her son why he couldn't use a public bathroom, where architecture embraced humanity in all its diverse forms. Victor had seen accessibility as an expensive inconvenience. I had shown it was an essential right, and in doing so, I had changed not just one man's career, but an entire firm's approach to the spaces they created. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't found in destroying your enemy, but in building something they never believed possible. Something that remains long after the battle is forgotten. I placed my hand on my grandmother's headstone. We did it, Gran, I whispered. The world's a little more accessible today, and that was a victory worth fighting for. If this story resonated with you, Please hit like and subscribe for more stories about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Have you ever witnessed or experienced accessibility issues that could have been easily addressed with proper design? Share your experiences in the comments. Your stories matter and deserve to be heard. Together, we can create a world where everyone has equal access to the spaces we all share.